Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Confrontation and conflict. That's the warning from a top Christian leader in Turkey over Turkish President Erdogan's plan to turn the famous Hagia Sophia into a mosque.
Opposition to Erdogan's plan is growing around the world, from Europe to Russia to the United States. Dale Hurd brings us the story.
It's long been the hope of many Turkish Muslims that the Hagia Sophia Museum would one day be converted back into a mosque. And Turkey's highest administrative court, the Council of State, is considering whether to allow it. The Hagia Sophia was a church for more than 900 years, then a mosque for almost 500 years. And it remains a major symbol of the struggle between Islam and Christianity. It was changed from a mosque to a museum by the founder of modern Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk.
Atatürk established Hagia Sophia as a museum to underline his vision of secularizing Turkey. And nearly 100 years later, I think Erdogan is trying to do the opposite.
The coronavirus outbreak has made Turkey's already weak economy even worse, with trade and tourism dropping dramatically. And some suspect President Erdogan is using the Hagia Sophia issue to shore up his political base and distract attention from the poor economy.
So it's not about a prayer space. It's not about building a mosque or providing for a mosque where that does not exist. It's rather using an issue of what I call Muslim nationalism, or emphasizing Turkey's Islamic identity at the expense of others, to mobilize his right-wing and conservative base.
Pro-Erdogan leader Yunus Genç said, of course someone who is a Christian would be against the Hagia Sophia reopening as a mosque. This is natural. But we're Muslim, and we want this monument to serve as a mosque in Istanbul, where Muslims are a majority. Bartholomew, the Patriarch of Constantinople, warns turning the museum into a mosque could bring confrontation and conflict. The European Parliament has also gone on record opposing the reconversion. Even some Russian parliament members are upset. And the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom has demanded the plans be withdrawn. First built in 360, destroyed by riots and then rebuilt under Emperor Justinian, the Hagia Sophia has undergone several name changes and even had its dome replaced after an earthquake. And now this historic structure could change yet again. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Well, we're all getting an education here on the history of Christianity. And keep in mind that what happened under Mehmet when Turkey conquered Constantinople and it changed its name to Istanbul. The symbol of that conflict and the symbol of that conquest was taking the Hagia Sophia and turning it into a mosque. This was the place where all the Byzantine emperors had their coronations. This is the place that was the center of Christianity for 900 years. It was the largest cathedral in the world, and it was a symbol for Muslim conquest. And for Muslims, this is a fulfillment of what was asked for by the Prophet Muhammad, first Constantinople and then Rome. So for Erdogan to be doing all of this right now, he is very much appealing to a Muslim home base, to Turkish nationalism, and to the fulfillment of the request of the prophet. That's what's happening. Now, what happened 100 years ago? Here's Atatürk. He's coming in as a secular leader of Turkey following World War I. And here was the exchange he made. He kicked out all the Christians, and we've sort of forgotten that fact. We've forgotten the massacre of whole sections of population. We conveniently forget all of that. But the exchange was all of the Catholic Christians, all of the Greek Orthodox Christians were expelled from Turkey in the 1920s. And the exchange was, we will convert the Hagia Sophia into a museum, and Turkey will be known as a secular state. And that was the appeal to the European powers. And that's why Turkey is considered to be part of Europe today. For Erdogan to go back on all of that he is now saying, yes, we are a Muslim state, and yes, we're fulfilling the requests of the prophet. And the rise of Turkey is something that everyone should take a look at as to what are they doing in Syria, what are their ultimate goals. And from my view of biblical prophecy, the rise of Turkey is yet another sign of the end of days. Where is Gog and Magog? Well, back in the 1970s, we said Russia. But for biblical times to today, it's always been centered at Turkey. So will they be the ones who launch an attack against Israel in the decades or centuries ahead? We don't know the time or the hour, but this is what's happening. And we have to acknowledge it for what it is. This is a rising nationalism in Turkey that's fueled by fundamental religious views. And in this case, it's Muslim views. And they want to take what was built as a Christian cathedral and turn it once again to be a mosque. Well, here at home, the number of coronavirus cases is still climbing, and now the death rate is rising again. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. Those new numbers are in for Thursday, and they're not good. Around 60,000 new cases reported, with the death toll climbing. At least 867 people died, according to the COVID tracking project. Florida, Texas, and California are reporting their highest death tolls yet, and the virus numbers are still rising in other states across the country. For example, Arizona hit a new record high for hospitalizations. Dr. Anthony Fauci saying cases are spreading because some states just reopened too fast.
Despite the guidelines and the recommendations to open up carefully and prudently, some states skipped over those and just opened up too quickly.
Overall, the country's daily death toll is still down from its late April high of more than 2,000 a day, and that's attributed to better treatment and because many new cases are in younger people. Experts warn, though, deaths are a lagging indicator. Well, much like other places, churches nationwide have had to shut their doors again as the coronavirus spreads across the country. CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy spoke exclusively with Task Force Coordinator Dr. Deborah Birx, who told him we could see a vaccine sometime this fall.
Dr. Birx tells me 3 drug candidates are in the final stage of human trials. Given the recent spike in cases, doses are being prepared just in case, ready to be sent out quickly to those in need.
We're making all of those vaccines, even though we don't know if they work yet, so that when we get that first signal that it's safe and it works, then it can immediately, we'll have doses that can really start by going to the most at risk.
The U.S. is doing 600,000 COVID-19 tests a day. As a result, for the first time, Dr. Birx said they're able to see the full spectrum of disease.
We also have to remember that we've become better at treating individuals with COVID in the hospitals.
Treatments like remdesivir and certain steroids have proven effective in treating the virus. Dr. Birx advises states seeing spikes like California, Florida, and Texas to put the brakes on reopening. This as attention is also focusing on places of worship. Do you consider churches to be a source for spreading COVID-19?
Well, any gathering indoors is a potential spreading event, but there has to be virus there.
Some churches located in hotspots are closing doors once again and turning back to virtual services, especially with studies pointing to potential for airborne transmission.
If churches would move outside, which the weather is beautiful, and social distance outside, we know that that is much safer. If they would wear masks, we know that is much safer.
Now, Dr. Birx said we could have the answer on antibodies by early fall, such as the September-October timeframe. She recommends people who have recovered from COVID-19 to donate plasma, which could be critical to those fighting the virus. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, the White House.
Thanks, Ben. President Trump will be holding an outdoor rally tomorrow in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where masks will be strongly encouraged. It is one of the key swing states in this year's election. The rally comes after the Supreme Court gave President Trump a victory and a loss on his taxes Thursday. The court ruled 7-2 in favor of a New York prosecutor who wants the president's tax records. By the same margin, the justices kept a hold on banking and other documents about Trump, family members, and his businesses that some in Congress have been seeking for more than a year.
Well, the rulings were basically starting all over again, sending everything back down to the lower courts, and you start all over again. And so from a certain point, I'm satisfied. From another point, I'm not satisfied.
Regardless of how the cases play out, the president's taxes and financial records will be kept out of the public eye at least until after the election. Well, we often hear about religious persecution in the usual places like North Korea, China, and Iran. Well, tensions are also running high in the small Balkan nation of Montenegro because of a controversial new law aimed at churches. It's led to widespread protests and detention of some of the country's most prominent Christian leaders. George Thomas brings us that story.
11 countries in this corner of southeastern Europe make up what's known as the Balkans. Among them, the tiny nation of Montenegro, home to some 600,000 people. For months, thousands of protesters, led by Serbian Orthodox Church leaders, have marched in cities across the country, protesting a law they claim allows the government to seize churches and other religious sites.
Those protests are interesting because they're happening as a prayer walks, and they're unique. They're also celebrating the Christian faith here in Montenegro.
Legal counsel for the church, Vladimir Loposavic, spoke with CBN News from Montenegro's capital city. He fears the law is a pretext to steal their properties, which include hundreds of medieval churches and ancient monasteries that dot the landscape.
In other words, it means that the government is going to try to rob the church, which means to jeopardize its own survival of the church itself.
The law, enacted in January, states that churches must provide proof of property ownership from before 1918 or risk their assets being taken by the government. Leposavic fears such a move might suppress Serbian Orthodox Christians from living in Montenegro and further restrict religious freedom.
The government claims that the churches and the temples supposedly do not belong to the church itself.
That's led to widespread protests, including clashes with police and repeated detention of those opposing the law, including Orthodox leaders and politicians. Since its independence in 2006, Montenegro's government has fostered closer ties with the West. A NATO member, it's now negotiating to join the European Union. Yet Montenegrins remain divided on whether to foster closer relations with Serbia and Russia or the West. For now, despite government restrictions on public gatherings due to the coronavirus, protesters continue to join church rallies across the country, demanding the government abandon its controversial religion law. George Thomas, CBN News.
Gordon, based on George's reporting, it looks like a state-sponsored land grab.
Well, that's exactly what it is, and it literally makes no sense. Why would you go to a congregation and say, unless you can prove some kind of document of ownership that goes back before 1918, and the reason they're picking that date is that's before the end of World War I. So you've got to prove somehow an ownership of what is tangibly obvious. There's a church building here, and there's a congregation here. So why are they doing it? Well, very definitely, this is a land grab, and it makes no sense to me. Why would you stir up this kind of religious conflict? The Balkans, I mean, there's a reason we call things Balkanized. It means that you are so fundamentally divided on religious and ethnic basis that you can't, come to peace with anyone. There's a long-standing Muslim-Christian conflict. This is the powder keg that set off World War I. There's been all kinds of conflict in Serbia and Croatia, and this is, why would you stir this kind of thing up? Well, the only thing that makes any sense is you see some kind of profit. For us here in America, keep in mind, government is very important, and if a new government wants to do things and come after you, well, they seem to be energized to do it.
Consider that when voting.